Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday morning worship. As usual on a Thursday, I'm going to share with you a story. I've actually chosen another story from a favourite book of mine, one that we had a couple of weeks ago. There's a Wolf in My Pudding. It's written by David Henry Wilson. It's actually full of funny tales and different alternative versions of stories that we think we know well. This morning's story is actually based on the story of Beauty and the Beast, but it's set before the story that we know well. So it's the story of how the Beast actually came to be a beast in the first place. Now, while you're listening to the story, I want you to think a little bit about friendship and our value of belonging. Think about what it is that makes a good friend. And as you listen, think about what makes the characters in this story become friends. What things are important and what things are not so important. Okay, so here we go. This is The Beast by David Henry Wilson. Most people know the story of how the ugly prince became handsome. Read Beauty and the Beast. Well, this is the story of how the handsome prince became ugly before he became handsome. The handsome prince lived in a castle in the centre of town. He had mirrors everywhere, so that he could admire himself coming and going, though sometimes he got so lost in his admiration that he didn't know whether he was coming or going. He would spend hours gazing into his own fascinated eyes and making the servants polish the mirrors so that his reflection could be even more dazzling. But his favourite occupation was riding through the town in his golden coach, for the people would all bow to him as he went. The old ladies would gasp, and the young ladies would swoon because he was so handsome. Of course, he would look straight ahead and pretend not to notice them. Now, the question on everybody's lips was, naturally, who would the prince marry? Every girl in the land wanted to be his wife, and every mother in the land wanted to be his mother-in-law. But the prince was in no hurry to find himself either a wife or a mother-in-law, since he found so much pleasure in simply sharing his life with himself. Then, one day, he had a visit from the king and queen, who lived in a different town. "Now, look here, my boy," said the king. "Your mother and I feel, well..." "It's time you got married," said the queen. "Exactly," said the king. "Every man in our family has a wife," said the queen. "I'm afraid that's true," said the king. "And it's time you had one as well," said the queen. "Your time has come," said the king. "But I don't want a wife," cried the prince. "Nonsense," said the queen. "No man can be happy without a wife. Look at your father. Where would he be without me?" "Don't answer that question," said the king, "but start looking for a bride." "And let us know when you've found her," said the queen, "because I shall want to organise the wedding." Off went the king and queen, and since their word was law, at least the queen's word was, even for the king, the prince let it be known that he was looking for a bride. The news echoed round the country like a bell in a church, and in no time at all there were huge queues of girls at the castle gates, round the castle walls, down the castle driveway and out into the town. There were girls of all sorts, shapes, sizes, colours, some with their mothers, some with their fathers, and even one or two with their husbands. The prince sat in the castle, and the girls were made to file past him. They were not allowed to speak, because the prince had made up his mind that he would not marry anyone who wasn't as beautiful as he was, and that was something he could judge with his eyes and not his ears. He sat there, hour after hour, murmuring, ugly. Very ugly. Oh, hideous. Vile. Monstrous. And every few minutes he would glance at the mirror to give himself some relief. Why look outside to find perfection when you can find it in your own reflection? The girls would go back to their mothers, fathers, husbands, and so on, and report the prince's verdict. Then they would either slink off home or have their hair restyled and join the end of the queue again. Meanwhile, more and more girls were arriving. Prince hunting had become the national sport, and the line of brides grew longer and longer, while the prince's patience grew shorter and shorter. "The trouble with my parents," he grumbled, "is that they've always been married. They just don't know what life is all about." And after 4 days of non-stop bride inspections and rejections, the prince was actually thinking of disobeying the king and queen. When? He shook his head and rubbed his eyes 3 times. Was he dreaming, or was she real? Golden hair, as soft as down, eyes shining like mirrors, marble smooth skin, cherry sweet lips. She was, without doubt, the most beautiful thing he had seen since he had last glanced at his reflection. He stood up and smiled the smile that launched 10,000 dreams. "She's the one," he cried. "I'm going to marry her. Tell all the others to go away." The servants hurried off to tell the waiting crowds that the prince had found his bride. The news was greeted with much mumbling and grumbling. "Been waiting for days, travelled miles, took a week off work. It's a fix. What about the semi-finals and finals?" Gradually, the people dispersed, while inside the castle the prince took his bride-to-be into his own favourite hall of mirrors. "Now then," he said, "let's have a good look at the two of us. My word, you really are almost as gorgeous as I am. What's your name, future princess?" But the girl didn't answer. Instead, she lifted her hand and in one swift movement pulled off her hair and face and threw them on the floor. They were really a wig and a mask. The creature the prince now found before him was the ugliest he had ever seen. Its head was as bald as a vulture's. Its skin was covered with toad warts. Its eyes were piggy, its nose beaky, and its mouth fishy. Its ears stuck up like fox ears, and its cheeks hung down like cow udders. It may have had a human body, but its face was positively beastly. The prince was so shocked that he couldn't even keep his eyes on himself. "My name," said the creature in a voice like that of a horse-crow, "is Mrs. Sweet. 2 days ago, you told my daughter, Sugar, that she was yucky. And she's been crying ever since. So, now you'll find out for yourself what it's like to be yucky." The witch, for that was what she was, made some strange movements with her hands and cried out, "From south to north, from west to east, there'll never be an uglier beast." Then she picked up her wig and mask and put them on again. "Have a good look at yourself in the mirror," she said, "because that's how you'll stay till someone agrees to marry you." Cackling like a hen that's laid a golden egg, Mrs. Sweet turned her back on her fiancé, or rather her ex-fiancé, and walked away from prince and castle. And when the prince at last dared to look into the mirror, The face he saw was the face of Mrs. Sweet. He went out into the corridor where 2 guards stood before the door. "Yuck!" screamed the first guard, and "Uggle!" gulped the second. Without exchanging a word, they each decided immediately that a guard's first duty was to guard himself. They had completed their goodbyes before the prince could even say hello. It was the same with everyone he met. One glimpse was enough to send soldiers and servants racing for the nearest door or window. And soon there was only one person left in the castle, though even he wasn't sure if he was a person or not. "Mad beast loose in castle," ran the newspaper headline. And an authoritative source, Fred Nutter, palace guard, was quoted as saying that the beast had eaten both the prince and his bride-to-be. "It were horrible," said the source, "and someone will have to do something about it. Only it won't be me." When at last the prince plucked up the courage to come out of the castle, he found the streets deserted, and all doors and windows bolted and barred. Occasionally he would catch sight of people in the distance, but they would also catch sight of him, and nobody stayed to take a closer look. He tried banging on doors and shouting out that he was the prince. "Talk about the wolf in sheep's clothing," said a voice from behind the shutters. "No, he's not," said another voice. "He's the wolf in wolf's clothing." "I'm not a wolf," cried the prince. "I'm the prince." But nobody believed him. "I'll marry anyone who agrees to marry me," he shouted. But nobody did. "I hate you all," he wailed. "And we hate you," called voices from behind shutters. Life as a beast was beastly. The prince wandered sadly into the park, where birds squawked and flew to the tops of trees, animals cowered behind bushes, and ducks dived headfirst into the lake and paddled away. "Not even a duck would marry me now," groaned the prince, though it's doubtful whether a duck would have married him even before he became a beast. Beside the lake there was a bench, and sitting on the bench was a man. The prince walked a little nearer, expecting the man to jump up and run away. But the man did not move. "Hello," said the prince. "Hello," said the man. Now the prince saw that the man was dressed in rags. "Not many people about," said the prince. "No," said the man. "They're all afraid of the beast. I was surprised to hear you coming." The prince saw that the man was blind. "You're the first person I've spoken to for days," he said, and suddenly felt tears running down his cheeks. "You're a stranger here, are you?" asked the blind man. "No," said the prince. "I'm the beast." "Oh," said the blind man. "Well, I think it's time I was going." "Please don't go," begged the prince. "You see, I'm not really a beast at all. Underneath, I'm a handsome prince." "Handsome prince, eh?" said the blind man. "Well, you don't sound like a beast, I must say. More like a lunatic." "I'm not a lunatic," cried the prince. "I'm the prince." He then told the blind man his whole story from start to finish, ending with the fact that he would have to stay a beast until someone agreed to marry him. "Lucky you," said the blind man. "What's lucky about me?" asked the prince. "I shall be ugly and blind for the rest of my life," said the blind man. "At least you have something to hope for." "What hope is there of anyone ever loving me?" asked the prince. "Well," said the blind man, "if I met a lady who was kind to me, I expect I'd love her however ugly she was. It's not everyone that sees with their eyes, you know. One day you could meet a lady that'll see you with her heart." "Does such a person exist?" asked the prince. "Oh, yes," said the blind man. "I'd marry you myself, only I'd look silly in a dress." The prince laughed for the first time since he'd become a beast. "I'm going away from the town now," he said. "I can't go on living here. But I've got another castle deep in the forest where I shall hide myself away. Will you come and live with me there?" The blind man was delighted to accept the invitation, and the prince led him to the forest, where they lived together for 4 years. The beast saw to everything the blind man couldn't do, and the blind man cheered the beast up by making him laugh and giving him hope. But then one dark winter's day, the blind man caught cold and died. The beast wept bitterly, and he buried his friend in the garden, with beautiful bushes of red roses to mark the spot where the blind man lay. Not long afterwards, Beauty's father rode into the forest, plucked one of the red roses, and the rest of the story you already know. But you should also be told that a few years after the prince and Beauty were married, they became king and queen, and they proved to be the wisest and kindest king and queen the country had ever known. So there you go. That's the story of how the beast became a beast. Now, can you remember the questions I wanted you to think about? What is it that makes a good friend? What things are important and what things are not so important? What did the prince learn about friendship and belonging? Just take a moment now to have a think. And if you've got somebody else in the room with you, perhaps tell somebody that's near to you. What do you think it is that's important about friendship? I wonder what ideas you've come up with. Being good looking, or particularly good at something, or amazingly cool, doesn't necessarily make someone a good friend, does it? Friendship is about much more than that. As the blind man reminded us, it's about kindness, and it's about acceptance, and about taking the time to get to know someone properly, not just judging them by the way they look, to find out about them, to find out about their interests. And it's definitely about helping people to feel that they belong. Now, we're going to finish our worship time now with a prayer. So if you'd like to, I'm going to invite you to join me in a short time of prayer. I'm going to start by reading a prayer from our prayer book. This one's been written by Emmy in Year 3. And then I'm going to invite all of you to join me as we say our school prayer together. Dear God, I will always have a sense of belonging when I pray to you. Amen. And now let's say our school prayer together. This is our school. Let peace dwell here. Let the rooms be full of contentment. Let love abide here. Love of one another, love of mankind, love of life itself, and love of God. Let us remember that as many hands make a house, so many hearts make a school. Amen. So, today and this week, make sure that you remember what really makes a good friend and how we can really help each other to feel as though we belong. How good a friend can you be? See you soon. Take care. God bless you all.